The commercial fertilizer industry pulled in nearly $188 billion last year. One company alone, a Canadian outfit called Nutrien, watched its profits climb 1,575% in just 2 years, landing at $7.7 billion by 2022. That is not a typo, by the way. 1,500%. And the retail side is no different. Walk into any nursery or garden center in America, and you will find an entire wall of bottles, pellets, and granules, each one promising to rescue your sad, yellowing tomato plant or that fiddle leaf fig you have been apologizing to for 6 months. These products work. Nobody is saying they do not. At least, that is what makes the next part so interesting. Because 5 of the most effective plant-reviving compounds on the planet are not sitting on those shelves at $12 or $15 a bag. They are sitting in your kitchen trash can right now, and they have been there every single day you have been gardening. The science behind them is not fringe. It is not some internet myth that your aunt shared on social media. University extension programs, soil scientists, and professional growers have studied these ingredients for decades. So why does nobody at the nursery mention them when you are standing at the register with $40 worth of products in your cart? Why does the back of every fertilizer bag list ingredients without ever mentioning that half of those same nutrients are available in your kitchen for free? It is not a conspiracy, it is just business. A store that tells you to use your banana peels and coffee grounds does not sell you a $12 bottle of potassium supplement. Simple as that. How does someone spend hundreds of dollars a year on fertilizer when the fix is literally in the garbage? That is what this video is about. 5 natural fertilizers that cost you absolutely nothing, how each one works on a biological level, and the specific mistakes that turn a free miracle into a waste of time. And the last one on this list is the one that even seasoned gardeners get wrong. Number 5. Banana peels. If you eat bananas, you have been throwing away one of the best potassium sources your garden will ever see. And potassium is not some minor player in plant health. It is the nutrient that controls water regulation inside the plant itself. When a plant is wilting, drooping, looking like it has given up on life, that is often a potassium problem. The cells cannot hold water properly, and the plant slowly dehydrates even when the soil is moist. A single banana peel contains roughly 420 milligrams of potassium. It also carries phosphorus, which drives root development, and calcium, which strengthens cell walls. That is 3 of the nutrients your struggling plant is most likely missing, all wrapped up in the thing you toss in the bin after breakfast. There are 2 ways to use them, and one is significantly better than the other. The first is direct burial. You chop the peel into small pieces, roughly a 1/4 inch, and bury them about 4 inches below the soil surface near the root zone of your outdoor plants. As the peel decomposes, it releases those nutrients slowly over weeks. The smaller you cut the pieces, the faster the breakdown happens because you are giving soil microorganisms more surface area to work with. This is called trench composting, and it has been used by gardeners for generations. You are essentially composting in place, skipping the compost bin entirely and letting the decomposition happen right where the roots can grab the nutrients as they become available. The second method is banana peel tea, and this is the one that delivers results faster. You take 3 or 4 peels, drop them into a mason jar filled with water, and let them sit in the refrigerator for about a week. The water pulls potassium and phosphorus out of the peel tissue during that soak. Strain the liquid, and you have got a mild but effective liquid fertilizer you can pour directly onto the soil around your plants. Some gardeners let the tea sit for up to a month to create a more concentrated solution that works well for acid-loving plants like blueberries. Either way, the banana water acts as both a liquid fertilizer and a mild pest deterrent. The compounds in the peel tissue have been shown to help repel aphids, which is a nice bonus you will not find on any product label at the garden center. There is also a third option that almost nobody talks about. You can dry banana peels in a low-heat oven until they are completely crisp and brittle. Then, grind them into a powder using a food processor or coffee grinder. That powder is a concentrated form of everything the peel offers. Mix it with crushed eggshells and a pinch of Epsom salt, and you have built yourself a homemade fertilizer blend that covers potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur in a single application. We will get to both of those other ingredients later in this video. Now, the mistake. And this is where most people ruin it. If you just toss a whole, uncut banana peel on top of the soil, especially with an indoor houseplant, you are not fertilizing anything. You are creating a buffet for fruit flies and fungus gnats. The peel sits on the surface, rots slowly, and attracts every pest in your house before it ever releases a meaningful amount of nutrients to the roots below. Chop it small and bury it, or make the tea. Surface dumping is how this trick earned a bad reputation it does not deserve. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Because the next fertilizer on this list is even easier than banana peels, and you have probably been pouring it straight down the drain every single night. Number 4. Cooking water. Every time you boil pasta, potatoes, rice, or vegetables, the water you drain off carries nutrients that leached out of the food during cooking. That cloudy, starchy liquid you tip into the sink is carrying phosphorus, potassium, iron, calcium, and zinc. Not in massive concentrations, but in exactly the kind of mild, steady doses that plants love. Think about what happens when you boil a pot of spaghetti. The starch molecules break free from the pasta as it cooks, which is why the water turns cloudy and slightly thick. Those starches are complex carbohydrates, and when you pour that water onto soil, the carbohydrates become food for the billions of bacteria and fungi living in your dirt. Those microorganisms are the engine of your soil. They break down organic matter, cycle nutrients, and directly feed plant roots through a microscopic exchange network that scientists call the soil food web. Feeding your soil microbes starchy cooking water is like adding fuel to that engine. More microbial activity means faster nutrient cycling, which means your plant gets access to nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that were locked up in organic matter and unavailable before. Vegetable cooking water is even better than pasta water, because when you boil carrots, potatoes, or green beans, you are pulling minerals and vitamins directly out of the vegetable tissue. That liquid has more nutritional variety than plain starch water. Potato water, in particular, tends to be richer in potassium and phosphorus than pasta water, because potatoes are dense tubers packed with minerals. Let it cool to room temperature, and you have a mild tonic that fruiting crops like tomatoes and peppers will genuinely appreciate. The practical side of this is almost embarrassingly easy. Keep a large jar or pitcher next to your stove. Every time you drain pasta, rice, or boiled vegetables, pour the cooled water into the jar instead of the sink. Use it within a day or two to water your indoor plants or outdoor garden beds. That is it. You are not brewing anything special. You are just redirecting something you were already making and already throwing away. One small note about rice water specifically. Rice water has gained a following on social media as a plant superfood. And while it does contain mild starches and trace nutrients similar to pasta water, it is not dramatically better. What it does do well is feed soil bacteria, which is the same benefit all cooking water provides. Do not overcomplicate it. Any unseasoned cooking water from any starchy or vegetable source is useful. The differences between them are minor compared to the difference between using any of them versus pouring them all down the drain. But there is one rule that makes or breaks this entire method, and if you get it wrong, you will kill your plant instead of saving it. Never use salted cooking water. Ever. If you salted the pasta water or seasoned the vegetable broth, that liquid is now toxic to plant roots. Sodium destroys soil structure, burns root tissue, and builds up in the pot or garden bed with every application. Same goes for water with oil or butter in it. Only use plain, unseasoned, unsalted cooking water that has been cooled to room temperature. If you normally salt your pasta water, just set aside a cup of the plain water before you add the salt. Simple workaround, and your plants will not know the difference. And somehow, this gets even better, because the next item on this list might be the single most misunderstood gardening ingredient on the internet. Number 3. Coffee grounds. Somewhere along the way, Coffee grounds became the most controversial kitchen scrap in gardening. Half the internet swears they are a miracle fertilizer. The other half says they will poison your soil and kill everything in the pot. And both sides are partially right, which is why this one needs more explanation than anything else on this list. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains everything. Used coffee grounds contain roughly 1 to 2% nitrogen by weight. That sounds small, but nitrogen is the nutrient responsible for leaf growth, green color, and overall plant vigor. When your plant looks pale, weak, and stunted, nitrogen deficiency is often the culprit. Coffee grounds also carry magnesium, copper, calcium, zinc, and manganese. These are micronutrients that most synthetic fertilizers do not include at all, which is one of the reasons plants fed exclusively on store-bought products can still develop mysterious deficiency symptoms. Now, the myth. The biggest misconception about coffee grounds is that they are highly acidic and will dramatically drop your soil pH. Brewed coffee is acidic, yes, but the brewing process extracts most of that acidity into your cup. The grounds left behind are nearly neutral, typically testing between 6.2 and 6.8 on the pH scale. Research from Oregon State University Extension confirmed this. Used coffee grounds will not meaningfully acidify your soil. If you are adding them, hoping to make your blueberries or azaleas happier, you are solving a problem that does not exist with that ingredient. So, if someone at the nursery tells you to buy a soil acidifier for your acid-loving plants and then suggests sprinkling coffee grounds on top for good measure, one of those products is doing the work and the other is not doing what you think it is doing. What coffee grounds actually do is something far more valuable than shifting pH. They improve soil structure. Their gritty texture helps loosen compacted clay soils and improve drainage. In sandy soils, the organic matter from decomposing grounds helps retain moisture. Texas A&M Extension has documented that coffee grounds provide all three major plant nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, plus micronutrients like magnesium, copper, and calcium that synthetic fertilizers often miss entirely. And there is a bonus that has nothing to do with nutrition. Oregon State researchers found that coffee grounds work as a slug and snail deterrent. Something about the caffeine and texture discourages these pests from crossing a ring of grounds around your plants. That is, pest control and fertilizer in the same free ingredient. But here is where most people mess this up, and the science backs this warning hard. A study published in the journal Urban Forestry and Urban Greening tested what happens when you dump fresh coffee grounds directly onto soil in large amounts. Every single plant in the study grew poorly, regardless of soil type. The researchers found evidence of nitrogen immobilization, meaning the grounds temporarily locked up nitrogen instead of releasing it, starving the very plants people were trying to feed. There was also evidence of phytotoxic effects from the compounds in uncomposted grounds. The fix is simple. Composting coffee grounds before applying them eliminates both problems. Mix them into your compost bin with other organic materials and let microorganisms break down the harmful compounds first. Coffee grounds heat up a compost pile fast because of their nitrogen content and their carbon-to-nitrogen ratio of 24:1, which is almost ideal for composting without any additives. If you want to apply them directly to the garden without composting first, keep the amount small, no more than about 20% of your total soil volume, and work them into the top 6 inches rather than piling them on the surface. A thick crust of coffee grounds on top of soil forms a water-resistant layer that repels moisture instead of absorbing it. For houseplants, the safest approach is to skip direct application entirely. Mix a thin layer of used grounds into finished compost or worm castings. Then use that blend as a top dressing. The grounds get their decomposition time inside the compost, and your houseplant gets the nutrients without the risk of mold, fungus gnats, or nitrogen lockout. And if you drink coffee every morning, which most of us do, you are generating a steady supply of this stuff without any extra effort. 1 cup of coffee produces roughly 2 tablespoons of used grounds. Over a week, that is almost a full cup of free fertilizer material. Over a growing season, you are looking at pounds of nitrogen-rich organic matter that would have ended up in a landfill. Used correctly, coffee grounds are one of the most complete free fertilizers you will ever find. Used incorrectly, they are a plant killer. The difference is literally just the method. If you are finding this helpful, hit subscribe. We break down food science, garden secrets, and backyard self-sufficiency every week. So that first bit was about what lives under the soil. But this next fertilizer targets something entirely different, a nutrient most gardeners never even think to check. Number 2. Eggshells. Every time you crack an egg for breakfast, the shell you throw away is roughly 95% calcium carbonate. That is the same compound used in agricultural lime, the product farmers buy to correct calcium-deficient soil. And calcium is not optional for plants. It is the mineral responsible for building and maintaining cell walls, which means it controls how strong, rigid, and structurally sound every part of the plant is. Stems, leaves, fruit, all of it depends on calcium. If you have ever grown tomatoes or peppers and watched the bottom of the fruit turn dark, mushy, and rotten, that is blossom end rot. It is one of the most common and frustrating problems in home gardens. And while it can be triggered by inconsistent watering, the underlying cause is almost always a calcium deficiency in the soil. The plant literally cannot build the cell walls of the fruit fast enough without enough calcium, and the tissue collapses. Eggshells fix this. But the method matters more than you might think. If you just toss half shells into your garden bed, they will sit there looking exactly the same for months. Eggshells decompose incredibly slowly in soil, years in some cases. So while the calcium is technically there, your plant cannot access it in any useful time frame. The solution is surface area. The finer you grind the shells, the faster soil microorganisms can break them down and release the calcium into a form plant roots can absorb. A mortar and pestle works. A coffee grinder is better. A food processor turns them into powder in seconds. That powder, mixed into the top few inches of soil, will start releasing calcium within weeks instead of years. For even faster delivery, make eggshell tea. Save your shells, rinse them clean, and boil about a dozen shells in a pot of water for 10 to 15 minutes. The boiling water dissolves some of the calcium carbonate directly into solution. Let it cool, strain out the shell fragments, and use the water to hydrate your plants. This delivers calcium to the root zone immediately, which is exactly what a struggling plant with blossom end rot needs. You can keep a jar of shells collecting in your fridge all week and brew a batch every weekend. One batch treats multiple plants, and the leftover shells can still be dried, ground up, and sprinkled into the garden afterward. Nothing goes to waste. Root crops benefit from eggshells too. Carrots, beets, and radishes develop better structure in calcium-rich soil because their cell walls form more evenly underground. And unlike many synthetic calcium supplements, crushed eggshells also provide trace amounts of magnesium and phosphorus as they break down. Here is a number that puts this in perspective. The average American household goes through about 270 eggs per year. That is 270 eggshells, each one packed with calcium carbonate, heading straight into the trash. If you saved and ground every single one of them, you would have enough calcium amendment to treat a modest backyard garden for an entire season, for free. While the nursery sells you a bag of garden lime for $8 to $12 to do the exact same thing, the mistake with eggshells is almost always the same. People do not grind them fine enough. A few big shell chunks tossed onto the soil do almost nothing in a single growing season. Powder works, chunks do not. That one step, grinding, is the entire difference between this being a useful fertilizer and a decorative waste of time. If you can still see recognizable shell fragments, you have not ground them enough. You want something close to flour consistency. Rinse the shells first to remove any egg residue. Let them dry out on a baking sheet and then pulverize them. Some gardeners bake the shells at a low temperature for about 10 minutes to make them more brittle and easier to grind. Either method works. Up to this point, everything on this list has been gentle, mild, slow release, The last fertilizer on this list works differently. It is the fastest acting item here. It costs about $4 for a carton that will last you an entire growing season. And it targets the exact efficiency that makes plants turn yellow and die in front of your eyes. Number 1. Epsom salt. Epsom salt is not actually salt at all, at least not in the way you think of table salt. Its chemical name is magnesium sulfate. It contains roughly 10% magnesium and 13% sulfur, two nutrients that are absolutely critical for plant survival but almost never included in basic commercial fertilizers. Here is why magnesium matters so much. Chlorophyll, the green pigment in leaves that makes photosynthesis possible, has a magnesium atom sitting at its center. Without enough magnesium, a plant physically cannot produce enough chlorophyll to convert sunlight into food. The leaves turn yellow between the veins, growth slows to a crawl, and the plant starts dying from the older leaves upward as it cannibalizes its own tissue, trying to move what little magnesium it has toward new growth. Cornell University assistant professor Neil Matson has noted that when a plant's lower leaves turn yellow between the veins, while the veins themselves stay green, that pattern is a textbook sign of magnesium deficiency. If the entire plant yellows uniformly, it may need more sulfate instead. Epsom salt supplies both. Sulfur, the other half of this compound, is essential for producing amino acids, proteins, and enzymes inside the plant. It is also the compound that gives vegetables like broccoli and onions their distinctive flavors. A plant without enough sulfur grows slowly, produces bland fruit, and struggles to fight off environmental stress. What makes Epsom salt special compared to synthetic fertilizers is that it does not build up in soil over time. Commercial fertilizers can leave behind salt residues that accumulate with each application, eventually reaching toxic levels that burn roots and damage soil structure. Epsom salt dissolves completely in water, delivers its nutrients, and leaves no harmful residue behind. You can use it repeatedly without worrying about long-term soil damage. The application is dead simple. Dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt in 1 gallon of water. Use that solution to water your plants at the base, or pour it into a spray bottle and mist the leaves for a foliar feed. For tomatoes and peppers, which are particularly hungry for magnesium, apply it every 2 weeks during the growing season. For roses, mix 1 tablespoon per foot of plant height into the soil at the base of the bush once a month. There is one more application that catches people off guard. Epsom salt can help with seed germination. Soaking seeds in a weak Epsom salt solution before planting strengthens the seed's cell walls and helps the emerging seedling access nutrients more efficiently right from the start. It is not a dramatic difference on its own, but combined with good soil and consistent watering, it gives your seeds a measurable head start. A 3-pound carton of Epsom salt costs around $4 at a pharmacy or grocery store. That carton will last most home gardeners an entire growing season. Compare that to a single bottle of specialty plant food from the nursery, which will run you $12 to $20 and contain less magnesium than the Epsom salt does. And unlike those specialty products, Epsom salt has been used in gardens for literally hundreds of years. It was first discovered in the well water of Epsom, England, and people have been using it on plants, on livestock, and on themselves ever since. The only caution is overuse. More is not better. Too much magnesium sulfate can create a nutrient imbalance in the soil, blocking the uptake of calcium and potassium. Stick to the 1 tablespoon per gallon ratio and apply every 2 to 4 weeks during the growing season. That is the sweet spot where you get all of the benefit and none of the risk. And this is the part that brings the whole video full circle. That nearly $200 billion fertilizer industry is not built on selling you bad products. The products work fine, but the industry is built on the assumption that you do not know what your kitchen already provides for free. Banana peels for potassium, cooking water for microbial fuel, coffee grounds for nitrogen and soil structure, eggshells for calcium, Epsom salt for magnesium and sulfur. 5 ingredients, 5 nutrient gaps covered. Total cost from your kitchen, $0. Total cost from the nursery shelf, anywhere from $50 to $200 a season, depending on how many products you buy. This is not a story about one garden trick. This is about every home gardener who has walked past their own trash can on the way to the store, not realizing the fix was right there the whole time. And once you understand the science behind why each one works, you stop guessing and start growing with actual confidence. If you want to see which common gardening mistakes are secretly killing your plants before any fertilizer can help, that video is on screen right now.